Ukraine supplemental. If I were in your chair, I would go over to the Jeffries people and say, I am going to vote for a discharge petition if it comes to that. I'd prefer if the president were to negotiate with Speaker Johnson and do something on the border, which you guys are going to get killed on, but I will support a discharge petition. Will you support a discharge petition?
If we can't pass it via structured rule, it's not quite 100% certain to me that we can't do that. There's a weird thing happening in the House right now. It's almost like we're becoming the Senate with the filibuster, right? Whereby if two or three people on the Rules Committee don't like something, they can tank it. Or if three or four members don't like something, they can tank the rules so we can't even move to a debate and a vote on the issue. That's not really how it was intended to be. So I don't see why we can't structure a process where even if skeptics of Ukraine funding, and I am not one of those, didn't want the bill to come to the floor, they would at least be allowed to submit amendments, and those amendments can pass or fail on their own merits, and the will of the body will move forward. But failing that, we're going to have to find a way to move forward. And if a supplemental is too big for people to swallow, we can consider my proposal, which I've been pushing for months now, which is to plus up the money for Indo-PACOM in Taiwan, rebalance it so that Indo-PACOM is a priority, and then allow the Pentagon to use unspent dollars, because for the last 5 years at least, the Pentagon has left $10 billion on the table every single year. If you were just to allow the Pentagon to repurpose that towards critical munitions, you would solve your problem in Ukraine, in Taiwan, and in Israel simultaneously. So multiple options. I guess the bottom line, Hugh, is I do think we need to restore our arsenal of deterrence. We can't just surrender and walk away. I really worry about the consequences for U.S. credibility if we do that.
Another thing you might do in retirement, however long that lasts from politics, is yesterday the Ukrainians sank a giant Russian transport with jet skis and drones. I really don't know if anyone is doing the rethink on what we build and what we buy and what we need to build and buy. Do you think someone's doing that?
You know, the Pentagon's trying to do something like this with the Replicator initiative. Now, I've been somewhat critical of Replicator, but I want it to work. Basically, the idea is to field thousands of attritable autonomous systems, so low-cost systems that you could imagine placing, you know, in the Taiwan Strait to sink a bunch of Chinese ships, as opposed to more expensive Navy ships and things like that. The problem is there's no dedicated funding line to it. And, you know, the Pentagon bureaucracy tends to move slower, but we have some good people working on that. Doug Beck at DIU is really impressive, and we've had multiple conversations. So, but there's a lot more work to be done. And indeed, I do hope to dedicate myself to that problem in the private sector, and by the way, Hugh, I have not ruled out public service going forward. I always envision the type of career where I'd be able to go between the private sector and stints of public service. And if I had an opportunity to work on that issue in a public or private capacity, I'd love to do that. The one thing we haven't talked about, Hugh, that's increasingly important, we're going to have to dedicate some time to over the next month, is who takes this prestigious seat that I've occupied.
The David Dreyer
years.
honorary chair. Yeah, Siege Perilous. We can't even remember if you took it over from Pompeo or Cotton. Do you remember?
I don't even know who those people are, but
Yeah,
you know, some are calling it the Gallagher seat now. A lot of people out there, a lot of your listeners, but we can address that later. We're going to have to start ranking.
Trump, what is some people?
Yeah, some people. Let me ask you about something, Chairman Gallagher. You know that it's Ash Wednesday, so the fines are doubled. You used an acronym DIU, which I have no idea what that is, and so you owe $20 in the tip jar today.
Defense Innovation Unit. It used to be called DIUX. It was created about a decade ago, a little less than that, to really help the Pentagon interface with Silicon Valley. Its headquarters is out in Silicon Valley, and it's had great leadership. Raj Shah was one of the earliest leaders. He did a phenomenal job, and then Michael Brown after him, and then now Doug Beck actually came from Apple to run it. But basically, it's, you know, how do we speed up the Pentagon's process for taking advantage of the best technology that exists in the commercial space, or technology coming from companies that aren't the traditional defense primes like Raytheon and Lockheed. And so, you know, it's very important. Doug Beck is doing a great job, and that's something that we could harness in order to field systems that are non-traditional but don't cost as much, and really create dilemmas for our adversaries. And that's absolutely critical, given that the conventional balance of power in the Indo-Pacific is eroding and trending in China's favor and not in our favor.
Now let's talk about your upcoming trip to Taiwan at the same time that we talk about whoever is going to succeed in the Dreyer, Pompeo, Cotton, Campbell, Gallagher chair. I don't know who we're going to put into this chair because they always end up leaving the house. But are you going to go to China soon? I mean, to Taiwan soon?
I am, yes. I can't say the precise date, but it will be very soon, and we're going to take a good bipartisan group of members, and I think it's really important. Even at the simplest level, Hugh, until you sort of see the terrain, which is hellacious in Taiwan, you don't have a full and walk it and walk the land, the likely landing spots. You don't have a full appreciation for how hard of a military problem this is for Xi Jinping to solve, which should give us hope. I mean, if we get our act together, we could put in place a defense in depth strategy that makes it difficult, if not impossible, for him to take Taiwan. I also think, at a broader level, it's just important for American legislators to show support for what is a flourishing democracy in Taiwan, thriving in the shadow of authoritarian aggression. And particularly given that the Taiwanese just had an election, I think it's important for us to develop those legislator-to-legislator relationships. And I certainly left my last trip to Taiwan armed with a ton of ideas for how we improve near-term deterrence. And I'm hoping to give that same experience to the members of the Select Committee.
And why is the Select Committee going to Boston? Because you got Harvard and MIT up there, and they are pro-Hamas, apparently. Why are you going to Boston?
Well, we went earlier this week. Boston is a epicenter for biotechnology innovation. You have these amazing companies like Ginkgo Bioworks who are competing directly with their Chinese counterparts. There's one Chinese company called BGI. And given the implications for warfare, given just the ethical and moral implications surrounding biotechnology, it's absolutely critical that American companies win and China doesn't dominate this space, because China will use that technology for dystopian purposes, human engineering, an enhanced DNA collection to turbocharge their genocide in Xinjiang. So we went there to engage really leaders in the biotech industry on how we can get our act together and to win this competition.
Very interesting. Final question. By hook or by crook, do we need to pass the supplemental, no matter what its final form is? Do we need to get aid to Ukraine?
We need to get aid to Israel, Ukraine, and Taiwan. And the last one, obviously, I am most focused on as the China guy, because if deterrence fails or breaks down across the Taiwan Strait, like it has in Eastern Europe, like it has in the Middle East, it will be a nightmare. It will make the current conflicts in the Middle East and Eastern Europe look like child's play in comparison. I guess you could step back and let's say you're more skeptical of Ukraine, or what we need to do overall is to build more weapons system, to restore our arsenal of deterrence so that we're ready for whatever crisis emerges. Our defense industrial base is brittle, and we must make it more robust and resilient.
I hope a letter emerges from the House Republicans in language that does not undercut the Speaker, that emphasizes that point. Maybe you can lead that letter, because there are enough hawks who are serious about national security in the Republican Party and the Democratic Party to bring out 300 people if it's worded the right way.